Joining me now in Midland, Texas is Sarah Spector. She's a criminal defense attorney who ran to be a district judge as a Democrat. And in Washington, D.C. is Frank Buckley, who's a senior editor at the conservative website, The American Spectator. I thank you both for joining us. Sarah, we're going to get into the legal counterattack from Trump against the two banks and the subpoenas and so on in a moment. But when we look at the Attorney General Barr, after everything now, do you believe that he polished the Mueller report, that he misrepresented it, that he told people, well, there's not much to look at here, when in fact there was?
He spun it like attorneys are taught to do in law school. He spun it, but I don't know if it was his place to spin it as the U.S. Attorney General. Mueller wrote a report. It says what it says. The American people can read it. And he definitely took the highlights of it and left out all the other parts, and he spun it for the American people.
And when he, Sarah, refuses to testify when called to the House committee, what does that tell you?
It tells me that he doesn't want to answer questions regarding the negative parts of the reports. He doesn't want people on the American public to watch him on national television and give the Congress an opportunity to bring out the negative points in Mueller's reports. He just wants the good parts out there. And I believe he's a good spin master, and he got it out there. He got it out there early, and he doesn't want any of the negative things in the report to come out. And most Americans are probably not going to read the report.
So, Sarah, to conclude then, because I want to go to Frank in a moment, but I want to know if you conclude this, that Barr has deliberately been spinning and covering for President Trump. He's
spinning for President Trump. I don't know that you can cover what is in a report. I mean, it's a report. I do believe most of it has been given to the American people. I believe the gist of it can be gotten from what is out there and what's not blacked out, and he's spinning it. He's spinning it. He's not changing the report. He's spinning it. And unfortunately, I don't think most Americans are going to read the report.
Okay, Frank Buckley, is the Attorney General spinning the report for the president?
Not at all. I think what he did is he acted like the chief law enforcement officer, the Attorney General. And what he wasn't doing was playing politics. He was answering questions strictly according to the law. And I think he did so quite well. I mean, what's going on right now is absolutely amazing. The continuation of the hysteria, right? We discovered from the Mueller report that there was no collusion with Russia. And what one might have expected would be for people to say, well, you know, thank God for that. We had called him a traitor for 2 full years, and now we see we're wrong. But, you know, instead of that, the effort is simply to continue the hysteria and now to point the finger at Attorney General Barr, right? I mean, there's a demand for villains, which is really quite shocking and you know, humiliating, I would have thought, for the Democrats to pursue this. The report is out. I think most Americans actually have kind of reacted to the report. There are some, you know, unpleasant things in the report about Trump, and the American people have reacted, and he's dropped in the polls. That tells you something.
Okay,
but the question for Barr was, is this guy a criminal? And he's not.
And when we look at some of those things said about Trump in the report, and beyond, it seems as if Trump is the one who's most upset because he's trying to sue 2 banks who are obliged, based on those House subpoenas, to provide some of the financials. Why do you think Trump is counterattacking in this way? Doesn't he look a little bit guilty when he's doing that?
Well, you know, when the American people elected Trump, they elected somebody they knew had a rather tarnished moral personality, and really that came out loud and clear from the Mueller report. I mean, there are a lot of things that are really damaging for Trump in all of this. I mean, he didn't obstruct justice, but he sure as heck tried to do so. There's a nice legal point there. I think in the end, that wasn't obstruction. But, you know, the fact is, we elected a fellow who was a bit of a rogue, and the question is whether or not that's an impeachable offense. The question is whether or not the votes of the American people who looked at Trump, elected him, should be canceled because he doesn't comport well in the eyes of, the Washington Post and the New York Times.
Sarah Specter, he's not a nice guy, but he's not a criminal, and he didn't collude with Russia, and he didn't obstruct justice. That's essentially what we're hearing from Frank. And the Democrats can't prove that he's a criminal, and this is all part of hysteria. And now the Democrats are just focusing on the Attorney General. I'm guessing you disagree with that.
Yeah, well, first of all, if you read the report, it doesn't say that he didn't collude with Russia. It says that there was no criminal conspiracy with Russia. And in fact, if you read the report as well, Mueller, quite early in the first part of the report, as to collusion or as to the first part of the report, he specifically points out things that they did do to possibly obstruct the investigation, such as typing in encrypted language, taking the Fifth Amendment, and a lot of his people are taking the Fifth, and also erasing emails, erasing evidence. And he said all that inhibited him from looking into collusion. And so it's not that he was just rogue. If the American people would take time to read the 400 pages, there's a lot of problematic things that Trump has done. It's not rogue. And yes, the American people elected him knowing he had problems, but it doesn't stop Congress from looking into what he has done and the conflicts he's done while he's in office. That's Congress's job, and it's not up to President Trump to say no.
Okay, so Frank, when you say that yes, Trump did try to obstruct the process, he didn't succeed, and there was no obstruction. And we look at some of the details with the subpoena. So McGahn is subpoenaed. The Trump administration's trying to stop that from happening because McGahn was the guy who said that Trump told me fire Mueller, right? So he's almost trying to obstruct the forensic look into obstruction, right? Isn't that a major red flag for you?
No, actually, not at all. I think that's really quite wrong. Here's what happened. For 2 years, the Mueller report went on, and we were told that this is going to definitively prove that there was collusion with the Russians. Look, I worked on the campaign. I knew there wasn't any collusion. I knew that the truth would come out. And if the truth can't be accepted at this point, it begins to look as if we're talking about Captain Ahab pursuing the great white whale in Moby Dick. I mean, it really is time to move on that one. There are, if I can well understand if you don't like things about Trump, but the proper thing to do at this point is to say, here they are, American people. Of course, you knew this all along, that he was a bit of a rogue. We don't like his policies. Let's run on that. That's what democracy is all about.
So why not comply with the House subpoenas?
Taking away the choices from the people.
Why not say we knew all along there was nothing to hide? So because you've issued your subpoenas. Sure, we'll play along. We'll play ball.
I'll tell you why. Because for 2 years he didn't assert executive privilege with respect to the Mueller investigation. He let it all hang out, and during that period of time, a lot of things were revealed about Trump which are really quite unpleasant. Nothing about collusion, mind you, but about efforts to obstruct justice.
He wasn't sitting back and just letting it happen. He was actively trying to fight it. He was actively trying to get Mueller fired.
He asked people to fire Mueller, and when they didn't, nothing happened. There's an interesting legal question here, and I think based on Supreme Court authority on this matter, that is not obstruction. But with respect to not wanting to send Barr to testify before Congress anymore, I think the proper answer is, look, Jerry Nadler, we've had 2 years of complete investigation of everything. Jerry Nadler, talk to the hand.
Okay, so Sarah, 2 years, and after all of this, not enough was found, according to Frank. Therefore, put it away now. There's other things. If you want to beat Trump, go and beat him in the election next year. You're wasting your time now. That's the perspective from a lot of Republicans. Why don't you agree with it?
There's a lot of problems in that report that talk to 10 instances of obstruction of justice by our chief executive of the United States, and now he's being enabled by our chief law enforcement officer of the United States. Our democracy depends on three branches of government, equal branches of government. And Congress was waiting on the Mueller report. They were waiting for the conclusions in the Mueller report, which are laid out in a prosecutorial memorandum. And it actually says in that memorandum that it's up to Congress to do what they may with it. And they have more questions, and they want to look at these 10 problematic instances of obstruction of justice, which quite may have impeded the collusion investigation, and they can look into it. They have the right to issue subpoenas, and for the president to ignore it, and for the attorney general to ignore it, and to sue banks that are complying with their legal obligation is again a continuation of the obstruction of justice.
Okay,
and there are 10. There are several.
Okay, so
it's not.
Okay, so let me ask Frank. If it's not
silly.
obstruction of justice, right? Okay, let's take the legal terminology away. But you would agree that it is part of the checks and balances, right? Congress has a right to do this. Would you agree that the president doesn't respect? He doesn't respect the checks and balances that are supposed to keep him in check.
Well, I don't think he trusts Jerry Nadler. But here's the point. Yes, there's a legal issue here. And with a longer memory, one might remember that the Attorney General of Barack Obama, Eric Holder, was subpoenaed to testify, refused the subpoena. The case went to court. Obama asserted executive privilege, and that was upheld by the United States courts. We have a precedent on this. Yes, there's checks and balances. But one thing that executive privilege means is you don't have to reveal everything. And indeed, after 2 years of not asserting executive privilege, and it all comes out in the Mueller report, we've heard it all. Everything you want to know is in that report, and nothing now, I think, reasonably could add a jot or tittle to what was in the report.
Sarah Spector, very finally, do you want the Attorney General to resign?
I don't think that it's for me to say he should resign. I think it's for Congress to act and to impeach him. I want them to impeach our Attorney General for lying to Congress last week, a couple months ago. Yeah.
Okay. Sarah Spector and Frank Buckley. This story is not going to go away anytime soon. Looking forward to talking to you both sometime soon. Thanks for joining us on the Newsmakers.
Thank you.